Welcome everyone and happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the ESEP Annual Town Hall. This event started a few years ago to spotlight science policy sessions at the AAAS Annual Meeting. And it's organized by the Engaging Scientists and Engineers in Policy Coalition, which is a group of organizations who work together to empower scientists and engineers to engage in policy at all levels of government. I want to thank Gwendolyn Bogart, Amanda Vernon, and especially Haley Swenson for putting this event together. They also put together a wonderful online resource which highlights science policy sessions at the meeting, which is going, thank you, into the chat. And we have a great session. I'm going to turn it now to our moderator, Toby Smith, to get us going. Toby?
Thanks, Erin. So Erin and I are, of course, the co-chairs of ESEP, Engaging Scientists and Engineers in Policy, which started this town hall several years ago. And I think we all wish we were in Philadelphia and doing this in person. And if we were, we would basically line up we would have a large room and a set of chairs, and we would line up the presenters, and each one would go down and talk about their respective sessions. But today we're going to do that via Zoom. And it's going to be very quick because we have about 14 or 15 of the organizers of science policy oriented sessions at the AAAS meeting. And we started this, of course, as Erin was saying, in part to help provide some direction for people who are interested in science policy and get a chance to hear just a brief snippet about some of the science policy oriented sessions that would happen during the AAAS meeting. So I'm not going to waste any more time except to say that we have about 14 presenters today, but there are several other sessions that are science policy oriented. And we have compiled with Haley's help and Amanda Vernon's help a listing of the sessions on science policy, which I think Haley's going to post a link to that so you can use that. And that's also a way to follow up if you hear a session today that you're particularly interested in and learn more about it. So with that, we are just going to go, and the way we're going to have everybody speak is chronologically. So we're going to start with the sessions on Thursday, of which we have one we're going to feature tonight. And I'm going to turn to Elana Kimbrell to talk about that session. Elana.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So this Thursday, the 17th, is the Communicating Science Seminar. It'll actually be the 10th time that we've had this at the AAAS Annual Meeting, sort of an all-day seminar. And when we were in person, it actually often had the ESEP Town Hall in the middle of the seminar day. It's during lunch break. So it's an opportunity to bring together scientists who are interested in and doing public engagement with science and science communication with science communicators and others who are interested in dialogue between scientists and other parts of society. And so this year we have our 9 a.m. Eastern Time session focused on cultural humility and cultural competence in public engagement with science. So it will highlight two different collaborations that became long-standing relationships between scientists and community groups that continue to evolve to meet those communities' needs. And so, how do we go into these kind of deeper relationships in a way that is, really acknowledging that we don't know other people's experiences and how to be kind of humble and engage in that way. And the next session at 11 a.m. Eastern Time will be on reciprocity and relationship building. So kind of different facet of engaging in partnerships with communities, also bringing together pairs of scientists and community leaders who have found ways to engage with communities that have had reasons to distrust science and scientists. And so both of those can be relevant to science policy as well, in terms of perhaps mostly like engaging with communities to then affect change at a more local policymaking level, perhaps related to, in these cases, environmental health, public health issues. And then we have a series of 5 concurrent breakout sessions at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and those include One that will be debriefing, unpacking the 2 panel sessions. Another, which is actually kind of more of a workshop on engaging with policymakers, that's led by Taylor Scott, who's also here today for another session she's doing. Another breakout will be on connecting science communication researchers and practitioners, one on mentorship in science communication, and one on science communication from around the world with different examples from other countries. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Elana. So now, okay, we're going to move to Friday, and I'm going to turn to Jessica Soule. Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for including me in the town hall. My name is Jessica Soule, and I'm the recruitment director for the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. And I'm here to tell you about a career workshop that we're hosting on Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, called Faculty Make for Excellent Science Policy Fellows. You might be wondering why I host a career workshop for faculty and mid and senior career professionals. And it's because we know that the call to public service and the desire for personal and professional growth and an interest in science policy are not limited to early career stages. And so the S&T Policy Fellowships welcomes fellows from all career stages. We've had fellows who were on sabbatical or leave of absence from a home institution. We've had fellows who are seeking career transition. We've had folks who are nearing retirement or even coming out of retirement to be fellows with us. And so we wanted to use this session to create a space for 2 of our faculty turned fellows to tell their stories. So if you join us on Friday morning, you'll get to meet Dr. Cassandra McNeil. She's an alumna fellow who spent 2 years at the NSF before returning to Jackson State University, where she took on a new role, and Dr. Fernando Bruno, who is a current fellow at the NIH and a faculty at Touro College. And during the session, you'll hear them discuss where they were in their careers before applying to STPF, and how they navigated that conversation to become a fellow with their home institution. And from Cassandra, you'll hear about the realities of re-entry following the fellowship. And then the second half of that career workshop will really be driven by audience questions. So everyone is welcome to attend, whether you're a faculty member or not. It's going to be a fantastic conversation, and we can hope you can join us and spread the word to others who might be interested in science policy but may not realize that the STPF fellowship is for them. So looking forward to hearing about all the other SciPol sessions happening during the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Jessica. I think it's really important. I think there are a lot of folks who always think that this is for folks who just got their PhD a couple of years, but having been on the Congressional Fellows review team, I've been a part of selecting some very senior faculty members for AAAS fellow slots. So thank you for that. Now we're going to move to Bruce Lewenstein. Bruce.
Thanks, Toby. Thanks very much for inviting me to be part of this. I'm Bruce Lewenstein from Cornell, and the session I'm talking about will be on Friday at noon, called Science Communication in a Diverse World. And the idea here is that the theme for this meeting is evidence that empowers. And we're questioning what counts as evidence. It's not just facts. But for people who are of different genders or different races, or who come from different parts of the world, or who speak different languages, or who connect with different knowledge systems, evidence might mean evidence of trust, or evidence of acknowledgement of difference, or evidence of understanding of historical inequities, or evidence of knowledge of a specific place. So what we've got are 3 wonderful speakers, Ana Maria Porras, who is from the University of Florida, who works on, besides being a biochemist, bioengineer, she works on issues of language. We have Claire Wilkinson from the University of West of England, who edited a special section on neglected spaces in science communication. And we have Rakib Tasfeh from McGill. She's a graduate student who runs a very active, it's called Broad Science. It's a radio program and other community outreach. The moderator will be Sunshine Menezes from the Metcalf Institute at the University of Rhode Island, who's one of the leaders of the inclusive science communication movement. So I hope very much we'll see you there on Friday at noon. Thanks.
Bruce, thank you. I think it's going to be a great discussion, and it's a really important topic. given some of the issues we're facing in terms of bringing evidence forward in ways that people believe it. So next on the list, I'm going to ask Fernando Tormos-Aponte to talk. Fernando.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm excited to share information about this workshop that we have coming up on Friday. It will be at noon until 12:45 p.m. Eastern, and it is titled Lessons for the Scientific Community on Activism and Movement Building. So we are going to be discussing all kinds of questions about building a powerful movement for science advocacy. We are going to draw from existing research as well as some new research that we're currently developing around how to build the movement, and specifically about the science advocacy movement. We're going to talk about what we already know about achieving policy change that makes sure that science is not interfered with and that science is used for the public good, as opposed to using science in ways that harm people and communities. It'll be a workshop, so people will have opportunities to take stock of the resources that we already have at hand that we can use to mobilize and empower scientists and communities to use science for the public good and build a strong science advocacy movement. I'll be joined by Melissa Varga, who manages the Science Network for the Union of Concerned Scientists, one of the largest organizations of mobilized and engaged scientists in the United States. Also, we'll be joined by Dana Fisher, a social movement scholar at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dominic Bernard, an environmental justice scholar, particularly around the areas of energy policy and energy poverty at the Arizona State University. So we're looking forward to engaging with folks. Make sure you share widely, and I look forward to meeting some of you over there.
Great, Fernando. Thank you. And this only is just the order. We're going chronologically by the time in which these are organized, but I'm going to call on another Fernando Bretos, to talk about his session, and that was not planned. So Fernando too.
It's not common to go from one Fernando to another Fernando. So tocayo. So I'm thrilled, even in Latin America. So I am chairing a panel called Ocean Diplomacy: How Common Threats to Shared Marine Resources Can Overcome Politics. It's kind of a phrase we created, right? It's based on the concept of science diplomacy, but ocean diplomacy is significant because of the ocean itself. It binds because of currents, because of migratory organisms, coral larvae, lobster larvae, sea turtles, whales. They travel on this ocean highway and they're connected, but national boundaries don't always recognize that. So I'll be presenting a bit about my own work between Cuba and the United States. I am Cuban myself, Cuban American, and how science helped pave the way for the unfortunately brief opening between the United States and Cuba. And we were told by the US agencies that the environment was indeed the low-hanging fruit after 55 years of two countries not talking very much. Also presenting will be David Freestone, who is being chairing the Sargasso Sea Commission, particularly the Hamilton Declaration, which brings together 10 different countries that share the Sargasso Sea, think open Atlantic, Bermuda, around there, to establish jurisdiction over, again, shared marine resources. Also, David Godfrey, who is a biologist who's been working on US-Russia cooperation on seals and walruses, looking at how Russia and the United States are working together on shared marine resources again. And in the case of all the presentations, it's not just that we're withstanding politics, in many cases overcoming and changing politics through science. Finally is Abed El-Rahman, who is a Lebanese scientist based at the National Center for Marine Sciences in Lebanon. He is an oceanographer, and he heads the Ocean Acidification Med Hub, which is involving 11 different countries, 50 different scientists. As you can imagine, the Mediterranean is a very dynamic, very tricky political area, particularly a lot of tension between the northern Mediterranean countries and the southern ones. And they're looking at ocean acidification, this idea, well, this reality that a lot of carbon dioxide is creating a change in ocean chemistry, and that all of us have to deal with that. And so this regional hub is bringing together the scientists in spite of very, very tricky politics to work together in terms of measuring, reporting ocean acidification and changing ocean chemistry. So we'll be presenting Friday at 2 p.m. and I hope we can convince some people that the ocean is relevant in terms of bringing scientists together to share these shared marine resources. Thanks.
Thanks, Fernando. So we're going to move from Friday now to the Saturday sessions. And kicking the Saturday sessions off, I'm going to turn to Christopher Jackson. Christopher.
Thanks. Hi, all. I'm here to chat a little bit today about this session hosted by Engineers and Scientists Acting Locally, or ESAL. It's called Injecting Science into Local Decision Making. It'll start off at 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. So hope all of you will join us. In particular for this audience, we want to kind of really highlight the ways where for folks who are interested in science policy and interested in kind of engaging, thinking not just about the federal level, but thinking about ways that they can get engaged at kind of the more local, including state, city, county, et cetera, level further down. To do that, some of ESAL's work largely focuses on removing that barrier, kind of that the information barrier and other barriers that kind of prevent folks from taking that first step towards local engagement. So we hope to kind of really tackle that throughout this session. We'll have two great speakers. One, Arti Garg, the founder and chair of ESAL, and I'm sure many folks on this call are familiar with as well. We'll be featuring Savannah Thace, who's a postdoctoral researcher at Princeton University and also has done a lot of work around using AI and responsible data analytics to tackle complex social challenges like equitable vaccine distribution and sexual health education. So two great speakers, and we'll kind of be using their stories as kind of case studies to really explore the ways for attendees that are particularly interested in tackling these types of issues in their community, or more broadly learning about opportunities to get involved at the local level, whether that's kind of identifying opportunities for commission service, for example, or kind of identifying partners that they can work with, and how to create those partnerships in ways that are kind of equitable and kind of fruitful for all the parties involved. So again, that's kind of injecting science to local decision making. It'll be at 11 on Saturday. Hope to see y'all there.
Thanks, Christopher. And I just want to commend the work that ESAL does overall in getting scientists and engineers involved at the local and regional levels. So let's move on to Debbie Stein. Debbie.
So hi, everybody. Glad to be with you again. Thanks, Toby and Aaron and everybody for organizing this. So the session, the workshop we have this year is called Empowering Non-Coastal States to Develop Climate Change Resilience Policies. It's on Saturday at noon. The thinking behind this is that I watched many climate change policy webinar, and it always drives me crazy that the focus is on the coast and not on the center of the country, yet people wonder why people in the center of the country don't care about climate change. So what we're going to have at this session are models where 3 states have conducted studies that focus on issues in the center of the country that are all red states. So we have Jeff Dukes from Purdue, who's going to talk about his experience doing a climate change related study in Indiana. Kevin Himes at the University of Idaho, focusing on obviously Idaho. And then I'll be talking about the work I've been doing in West Virginia as part of the West Virginia University Bridge Initiative. So that's sort of the first goals. The second aspect in terms of how to do a study in the middle of the country is just thinking about communication and how that works. So oftentimes the studies that are done are, knowledge deficit model, thinking only if we tell them they will come. And instead, what we really have to do is begin to use more collaborative models. So all 3 of these studies use collaborative models, which involve interacting with stakeholders to develop and teach and learn from one another. And so Rachel Owen, who is formerly headed up the Missouri program, in terms of the State Science Technology Policy Fellowship Program, is going to give some tips on how to communicate in non-coastal states when you're interacting with people who may or may not be supportive of whatever perspective that you have. And then finally, we're going to close with our open mic, which we've also done for the past couple of years, which is great. And so the whole idea here is people get like 30 seconds to tell about whatever activities they're doing at the state and local level. And so we found out about all sorts of interesting activities. And so that's always a fun rush to see how many state and local activities we can get before 45 minutes is up. And that's for me. That again, this is empowering non-coastal states to develop climate change resilience policies, Saturday from 12 to 12:45.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Now we're going to turn to Matt Horahan from AAAS. Matt.
Thank you, Toby. Hello, everybody. Nice to see y'all. So our session on Saturday afternoon is going to be on the kind of an up-to-the-minute update on the federal science budget. It's going to be myself, and I'm with the AAAS R&D budget program. I think many of you know me. Not everyone does though. So it'll be myself, Debbie Altenberg with APLU. And Paul Doucette of Battelle. And Battelle, as I'm sure y'all know, they run several national labs. And when we originally planned this session, we looked at the calendar, we saw the current, there's a continuing resolution that runs through February 18th. We figured, okay, well, there's a critical deadline. We'll have some updates. Maybe we'll have some legislative language, some omnibus language, and we don't have any of that. So what we actually are going to talk about kind of remains to be determined. I expect, we'll talk a bit about what we hope will happen, what Congress has done so far. We may talk a little bit about, where things are going next, the next steps in the process. We'll certainly cover any kind of late breaking news that happens this week. It sounds like, one of the big sticking points has been, the overall defense and non-defense spending numbers. We'll hopefully have some clarity on that by the end of the week. We may also speculate a little bit about what we might see in the FY23 budget request, which is going to be coming, although, probably can't get too far down that road. Just because I'm going to share a couple of resources with everybody. I think many of you have seen these already, but in the chat box, I just shared a link to our FY22 appropriations dashboard, which lets you follow appropriations between House, Senate, White House, and eventually final appropriations for various science funding agencies and programs. It's pretty detailed. People seem to like it. It gets a lot of usage. And then I'm also going to share a short report we wrote in December that breaks down kind of where we are right now in terms of overall spending and includes some highlights on R&D by functional area, things like that. We shared this with policymakers who seem to find it helpful context. But also spotlights. I think we have climate programs as well as STEM ed programs spotlighted briefly. It's not a long report, but it kind of just wraps things up in a bow. So you'll check those out if you like. Happy to take. If you have any questions on any of this, feel free to ask my colleague Alessandra, who's also on the call. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And as I said, if you do have questions as we go for specific panel members, feel free to put them in the chat. We will get to the end here and we're going to open it up where you can ask any of the panel members specific, broad questions on science policy. So let's finish out Saturday with Taylor Scott. Taylor.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Taylor Scott. I direct research translation strategies for the Evidence to Impact Collaborative at Penn State, and I co-direct the Research to Policy Collaboration, which is a replicable model for developing partnerships between researchers and policymakers. Today, I have with me joining my 4-month-old son. So you see me do a little baby bop. He's hopefully going to nap while I talk. Thanks for working with me. It's childcare after 5 on the East Coast. We actually have a couple of sessions. Our Saturday workshop is one that is SciComm specific. It's thinking about how we establish credibility and use storytelling and write fact sheets. I'll say one thing that's we find our team to be sort of situated in this like science of science space which is an increasing priority that we see at NSF and NIH to increase not just the science development itself, but to think about how do we increase the social impact and use of our sciences. So we specialize in studying how science is used using rigorous experimental studies and design. So in both of our sessions, we draw upon randomized controlled trials to reveal some of what we've found works in terms of science communication and developing rapport with offices. So for the Saturday workshop, we'll describe core theory regarding the scientist's role as an honest broker for supporting policymakers' use of research evidence in an agenda-neutral way. This is pretty consistent with, I think, Deborah Stein said something a minute ago about being really collaborative, approaching policymakers as partners is part of this core theory. So drawing on the RCTs we've done for SciComm testing, we'll talk about how to indicate credibility, adapt to policymakers' norms, indicate sort of being able to be personable and relatable. We'll also show some examples of storytelling, how we can sort of indicate, our real world experiences and how those exemplify science, or just personalize and personify ourselves as real people in this relational approach to bridging research and policy. And this is going to correspond with an e-worksheet that will help to create a framework for developing a fact sheet. Is it okay if I mention the breakout session on Thursday as well?
Very quickly.
Sure. So Beth and I are going to talk about how to schedule and meet with legislative officials. We'll draw on findings from the same RCTs to illustrate best practices. The main question here is how to get the attention of legislators and how to find the right staffer and write emails to them, follow through after a meeting, communication strategies, and the exercises that are built into that session will help prepare attendees for policy engagement.
Thanks, Taylor. I'm glad you mentioned that last one. I actually, that is a very practical, good session. So I'm glad you stuck that in. So, okay, we are moving now from Saturday to our Sunday sessions, and I'm going to turn to Holly Mayton. Holly.
Thanks so much, Toby, and great to see everybody. I'm Holly Mayton with the National Science Policy Network, and we're a network that aims to create resources for anyone who's new to the world of science policy and wants to figure out how to get involved. And so it's great to hear about all of these awesome sessions, and convenient that our 2 workshops are both on Sunday, where we hope people will be able to come and figure out how they're going to put into practice all of this great things that they've learned about science policy at the whole annual meeting. So the first one is called Inclusive Science Policy Analysis and Tools. This is at 11 o'clock on Sunday, and is really meant for anyone who's looking to strengthen their skill set or expand the tools at their disposal for incorporating equity, ethics, and inclusivity into their science policy projects, whether it's a writing project, research project, or anything in that domain. So that'll feature Ans Irfan, who's a professor of public health and a visiting scholar at Harvard in their School of Philosophy, as well as Marissa Ramirez from the National Resource Defense Council, who will share some examples related to COVID and climate change of how they've put inclusive science policy to work. And we'll have some space for attendees of that workshop to think about how they might apply that to their own work. The second is a workshop called Resources for Early Career Scientists Catalyzing Policy Change. And I see quite a few of our panelists on the call today. That'll be at 1 o'clock on Sunday, and we'll feature our Associate Director at the National Science Policy Network, Brianna Brown, Chris from Engineers and Scientists Acting Locally, who you heard from earlier, and I see Adriana Bankston from the Journal of Science Policy and Governance, all places where early career scientists and engineers can really get to work in the world of science policy, and we're looking forward to sharing opportunities to do so and creating space for people to meet each other and collaborate. So hope to see some of you on Sunday.
Thanks, Holly. So now we will move to William Pridmore. William.
Pridmore, thanks, Toby.
Pridmore.
So hi, everyone, and thanks to AAAS for including our panel here. I'll mention I'm a proud fellow of American Association for the Advancement of Science, and I'm a liaison to AAAS for the American Society of Criminology, which is sponsoring our panel. And as you can see from the title of our panel, which is Generating Evidence to Empower Crime and Justice Policy to Reduce Harm, it relates directly to this year's AAAS theme of empowering with evidence. So the consequences of crime and violence produce tremendous burdens for individuals and families and communities and society and the public purse. And also justice, at least should be, right at the heart of any democratic nation. But crime and justice policy, however, too often stems from politics and emotion and strongly held but woefully uninformed opinion, instead of evidence derived from rigorous research. So our panel's first presenter will address the empirical justifications for and the effects of extreme risk protection orders, which temporarily restrict firearm access from individuals at risk of committing violence. And she focuses, focuses on mass shooters who often signal, or potential mass shooters who often signal their intent and thus make ERPOs uniquely situated for prevention. And she provides fresh results from an ongoing study. Our second presenter considers one important aspect of police behavior and reform, and she uses a randomized controlled trial design. And her panel regression results show that police de-escalation training produce statistically significant reductions in use of force, in citizen injuries, and officer injuries. Our third presenter is a senior science advisor at the U.S. National Institute of Justice. NIJ is tasked by Congress to advance justice and produce real-world benefits for justice systems and victim service agencies via scientific innovation. And she will describe NIJ's critical role in supporting rigorous research and program evaluations, and she provides examples of how NIJ empowers its constituents with evidence. So our responses to crime and violence commonly exacerbate challenges instead of resolving them. So we need to be generating trustworthy evidence base that empowers policymakers and practitioners to diminish the burden of crime and to promote justice. And our panelists, presenters do just that. So we hope to see you at our panel this Sunday at noon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, William. Next, we are going to move to Shannon Wolfman. Shannon.
Hi there. Thanks so much for inviting us. I'm Shannon Wolfman. I'm the president of the Penn Science Policy and Diplomacy Group. And our session is about understanding the evidence in evidence-based policymaking. It'll be February 20th, the Sunday at noon. Basically, the idea behind this was to sort of look at how is evidence actually used in the policymaking process, who gets to decide what is good evidence, what isn't, and how, and which evidence really counts in the process. So in this panel, we're going to be having Chloe McPherson, who is a former AAAS fellow who worked in Christy Houlihan's office. We're going to have Kathleen Hall Jameson, who is a professor at the Annenberg School for Annenberg Center at UPenn. And she founded factcheck.org, and Paul Kearney from the University of Stirling. And so their respective talks are going to be about, Chloe will talk about how evidence-based policy or evidence is used in Congress and its role in actually making policy. And Kathleen will be telling us about how we can distinguish which evidence is good when there's conflicting science, and especially in cases where the science has become politicized. And then Paul will be talking to us about what does follow the science actually mean, not just in theory, but in reality, and deciding who gets to figure out which evidence counts in the policy space. And we're hoping also to get a little bit of a discussion about the sort of failings of evidence-based policy, and in terms of like technocracy, whether it's good or bad, basically the role that evidence should be playing in policy questions, which, as we know, are not just scientific questions, but also values-based. We also have another session about the role that scientists have played in sowing distrust for science, where we try to take an introspective and historical look at ways that we haven't done the best job. But that's not the focus here, but I just wanted to mention it.
What
So
time
that's-
is, Shannon, what time is the second session?
The second session is, sorry, I didn't have it up because I just added it on at the end. It's on Saturday.
Friday at
Tell you what. Oh, go ahead.
It's on Friday at noon, 12 to 12:45.
Great.
Thank you, Stefan. And I wanted to highlight that Stefan is really the driving force behind organizing both of these panels and did an amazing job doing all of that. So if you have questions, really, he's the person to direct them to.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you. So I believe that we are now at our last presenter, and that is Ankita Arora. Ankita, and I hope I got your name pronounced correctly.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Tobin. So yes, I am Ankita Arora. I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Colorado, Denver. I'm speaking here as a member of NSPN, especially as a member of Science Diplomacy Committee there. Our session is being held on Sunday from 2 to 2:45, and it's called as Science Policy Barriers and Opportunity for International Scholars. What we want to dig into this session is how science policy tends to be a bit restrictive for international scholars, where bigger science policies such as the AAAS is currently international scholars are not eligible to apply for those. But we also want to move our focus from that bottleneck to move on from what current opportunities still exist despite of that bottleneck, and how we can take most advantage as international scholars to take part in science policy. We have some of our speakers include Marga Gogol-Soer. She would be talking about her experience as an international and what was her track to move towards science diplomacy, where she can play an important role despite being an international here in US. Our second speaker would have a different perspective in terms of how it was for him to follow science policy as an international here in US itself. His name is Jay Chatterjee. Is currently serving as the Franklin Fellow at the US Department of State, helping with agricultural policy. And our third speaker would be Bill Cognizer, who is the AAAS Science and Diplomacy editor. Again, focusing on some of the equity issues he has seen within his span at NSF as well. And then going from there, talking a bit about how diplomacy can be a route for international scholars.
Thank you, Ankita. And thanks to everybody for taking the time to talk about your sessions. This is now the time when people can ask questions of others, including the panel members. And I do want to say, I noticed Debbie Stein put in the chat that one of the challenges is always that there are several good sessions often competing with each other. Although the good news is I do think you will be able to, if you register for the meeting, watch them on video after, but you won't be able to ask questions of people. So if you know they're one of those conflicting sessions, this is a good chance to ask a specific question to somebody who's organizing a specific panel. But I'd also just, the great thing about this session, and we've got about 20 minutes left, is just the opportunity to ask such a diverse group of people who come at science policy from different perspectives any question that you want. So we're going to use the raise hand function, and I'm going to start. Well, I'm going to call on Debbie. I have my lineup of questions should we need them. But I will have Debbie ask the first question. Debbie.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it occurred to me, and this goes back to like having a bunch of wise people, diverse backgrounds. So I had actually prepared an op-ed for Politico in response to the Eric Lander situation before he resigned. And one of the things that I had in that proposal, which I still plan to pursue, is the need for like an ombudsman like at the White House, and maybe make it a requirement for universities and so forth. And so when Donna mentioned that one of our crew was about to become an ombudsperson at Cornell, and because there were so many young people around, I was just really interested if people had opinions on ombudspersons and the need for them and so forth. Not only, like I'm thinking in the White House, there needs to be one, but I could also say for many other places, including universities. So it looks like maybe I already have a response.
Bruce, did you want to respond?
Sure, I might as well, since I am the
Oh yeah, I know why you're
ombuds
responding. Now I know.
at Cornell. I should say this is a second tour of duty for me. 42 years ago, when I was an undergraduate, I was the student ombudsman at my undergraduate university. Many people may not know what an ombuds is, right? It's that word that nobody quite understands. We work in organizations. We are impartial, independent. We don't report to anyone. Informal. We are not part of any formal process. And when you come to an ombuds, everything you say is completely confidential. Those are the tenets that the International Ombuds Association sets up for professional ombuds. Many government agencies do have ombuds. Many universities do. Even more are creating them even as I speak. I've already had a meeting this week with someone who wanted to. I've only been in the job 2 weeks, and I've already met with someone else who's trying to set one up. So I'm glad to answer more questions about the ombuds role, but I do want to just back up Debbie's point that an ombuds can be a great resource for an organization as a way of reporting things or getting guidance or resources or how you can report or what the best approach to a problem might be. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. Ankita.
Yeah, I think I can speak from the other side of it. I was the chief communications officer at the postdoctoral association at my campus here. And I myself have pretty extensively used the Ombuds office quite a lot here at the university, and I appreciate it. And as a part of a communication officer, I have redirected quite a bit of our postdoctoral fellows at the university to the Ombuds office, and the feedback I got after the help they've received has been pretty positive. So I would highly recommend the use of Ombuds office all across universities.
Great, thank you. So Debbie, I think you've gotten at least some feedback that says it's a good idea. And I think these cases I think there's gotta be outlets for people and places to go to raise these issues. It's a totally different issue because it's really this is about people. The other thing is I know that that the other thing federal agencies have is they have the scientific integrity officers. Totally different, I mean, mind you, but another way to bring issues about more of the science and the maintaining the scientific integrity, whereas you also ombudsmen play a very different role. But it's just another thing I'd put out there, especially as we talk about evidence in policy making, which is the theme of this year's meeting. Are there other questions or comments? And so I'd welcome people opening this up to a discussion. If you heard any interesting topics that you had, I'm always pleased. I will tell you something I'm very pleased to see is the number of early career folks that we have on this call, but also more importantly, that are organizing sessions, which is really exciting. And I think if you go back 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that. And so I really think that's great. So I'd welcome some of you who might want to take advantage of some of the folks who are more, have been around the block here on science policy to ask any questions you might have. And if not, I'll ask the panel members if they were looking for some advice of people who want to get into science policy, what that might be. Or the other thing is, the other question I like to ask is for you, what does science policy mean? Which I can kick that one off because I often think that people have a very narrow view of what science policy is. And I think one thing we demonstrate by this session is how broad, when we talk about science policy, it really is. And I point out to people that it does happen at a local level. And in my home county of Arlington, I've been involved in many local commissions, and we have a group called E2C2, which gets into a lot of local science policy issues, and they're an external commission, everything up to what we talk about at the federal level to the issues we've talked about a little bit on the international level. So I often think that people have to think very broadly about what science policy is and what it means. Debbie, you have a comment?
I was just going to reflect on I was counseling somebody earlier, like yesterday, I guess it was, on the career front. And, when I talked with her, it was, and this person's currently at NIH and like in a postdoc kind of position. And I think one of the most important things that people should know about going to science technology policy is you do not have to be a AAAS Science Technology Policy Fellow to get into science technology policy, which somehow is spread, I think, as a belief because of the abundance of fellows that are out there. Not that it's not a great way to advance, but you can actually go directly from a PhD into a real job that is in science and technology policy. And there are also jobs outside of DC. It's not necessarily working for government. And so I think that my advice on this is just to make sure to be very expansive in thinking about like your career and what policy is. And because sometimes the AAAS program does not fit well with people's schedules, where they want to live, everything else. So I just wanted to throw that in since I just had that conversation yesterday.
Debbie, thanks. I'd make a pitch too. One way to watch in the breadth, if you're really interested and you're thinking about a career in science policy or even already in a career, is just ESEP leads the SciPol jobs hashtag and then the website. And I often post jobs that I see through an Indeed search. It's fascinating to see how broad those can be and how multifaceted they can be. And it kind of gives you a real idea. In terms of off cycle, well, a story of somebody who didn't get a AAAS fellow, and I actually know a few of these folks fellowship, but Carrie Willenitz, who had been director of science policy at the NIH, she never applied for the AAAS fellowship because it was just the wrong timing. She got her first job at FASEB through a Washington Post ad. So don't ever, you never know how you will get a job. And I just say the one thing that scientists aren't that good at, I'm not, I mean, it was really a political scientist, is the networking that goes on in Washington, and happy to give that speech offline to anybody who wants to hear it. Shannon.
Yeah, so I am not in a science policy career, but for anyone who is just interested in starting to get involved, especially early career scientists, your university might have a science policy chapter, and a lot of those are quite active. And I mean, here at Penn, we are super active and do a lot of programming and a lot of hands-on experience for early career scientists to see what it's like to be engaged in this space. And I would also highly recommend NSPN. I did a boot camp, a science policy boot camp through NSPN, and then got a part-time science policy internship that I'm doing now with annual reviews. And that could eventually turn into an actual job. So all of that I found out about through engagement with my chapter before I was the president of it, my science policy group on campus. And then in regards to your question about what is science policy, we do a Science Policy 101 workshop at our Penn Science Policy and Diplomacy group. And one of the questions we always ask is for people to try to think about a policy question that doesn't have a scientific component. And in my opinion, at least, there's no question that doesn't have something that you can look at scientifically. Obviously, there's a distinction between values-based questions and scientific questions, but you can always look at evidence on different policy aspects. So that's my thought on it.
Great, Shannon. And I think the emergence of the through NSPM, the National Science Policy Network, and the local, student groups has just been great. It's one of the reasons we're seeing so many early career folks involved in AAAS the way they are. So I think that's good. Other thoughts, especially if you want to get involved, and sometimes people don't think of it's usually there's like a government relations representative for every scientific society. So if you're interested in policy, that's a good person to really reach out to. Sometimes universities have representatives, and I think Kate Stoll's on, who represents MIT, for example. And that was a job I used to do. And I always loved to talk to students or get them involved in ways, or bring them to Washington to talk about what they did. So there's lots of ways, and sometimes being creative in what you think and how you get engaged. And ESOL's been great at providing some resources as to how to get involved at the local and state level. Taylor.
Hi, yes, thanks. I know we're close to time, so I'll try to be brief. I direct policy training as well for the research policy collaboration, which at core, our goal is to really mobilize the scientific community to be part of policy conversations with policymakers. So I would say that my number one tip for anyone in this area is to find a way to get involved. And oftentimes that's breaking outside of the academy, but these intersections where you have a number of folks on this a really impressive lineup you've got here today, Tobin, is the areas that you can get involved in maybe it's your university, maybe it's some of these intermediaries. I would identify in this intermediary space of kind of brokering between these two worlds of policy and research. If you can get involved in an intermediary, especially a trusted source. I've seen researchers involved in advocacy organizations. I've seen people take fellowships that aren't AAAS, including just being, situated in a congressional office or an administrative role. But getting involved is number one. I posted in the chat that we wrote a paper about kind of this continuum of involvement where you can do like workshops, like at conferences, like what we're doing at AAAS, all the way to the fellowship. What's in between? What's the in between just that one-day workshop versus spending your whole year in a policy role? There's got to be some ways to kind of chip away at the policy work in between those two things. And so thinking about how people can get involved through intermediaries is key.
Yeah, Taylor, I think it was your continuum I saw on Twitter that you recently posted. Is that the one?
We posted one about researchers' policy engagement in the American Psychologist. Maybe that's the one.
Yeah, there was another one that was a continuum of just the kind of when you look at it. But I often say there's because people sometimes kind of compare the very political type science policy type options versus the more, national academies, much more, folks who are really want to stay connected to the academic community. So there's a wide range. And I think it's really just, I think a lot of times people do not have the breadth and think about the whole range of options.
Maybe it was the science policy video I did where I compared like your role of Bill Nye versus Fauci. And there's like that kind of continuum of like, do you want to be kind of behind the scenes? Because if it weren't for the pandemic, no one would know who Fauci is. He's just like this trusted advisor behind the scenes. But, politicization of the pandemic aside, that's a ship that sailed. Otherwise, you've got Bill Nye, who's sort of, raging against this machine, trying to, drum up support and pressure politicians to think differently about climate change. Where do you want to be? I agree. I think that that's one way to think about it. And intermediaries can be on one side of the continuum or the other.
Yep. Well, we are coming down to time. Are there any final thoughts people want to share before we go? And just a reminder that I think we posted the information, the link to the summary of science policy sessions. Again, I will miss seeing all of you in person and hope that next year this is not the case. For those of you in DC, we will be starting hopefully in the spring, the ESEP science policy happy hours in person again, which I think we all miss. And I'm excited to start seeing people in person so we can talk directly. Any final thoughts from anybody before we close? If not, just a final thank you to all of you who participated and organized sessions for the AAAS conference. There are a lot of things going on, and hopefully we've at least shed some light on some of the opportunities that will be available. And I see my internet connection is unstable, so that might be a good time to say thank you and to close this session before I get cut off. So with that, thank you all and have a great night.